All right, good morning, everyone. Good to have you here. My name is Paul Trani. I'm going to dive into using color in Illustrator as part of a series I'm working on. So, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Just let me know where you're from, and I'll just refresh this, make sure we have everybody joining me. So cool. Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to dive into working with color. My name is Paul Trani, and we're going to be using Illustrator. And you can see behind me is kind of what we're going to be working with. But I'm going to show you about 3 different color techniques that you can use, and really how to sort of master and match color as well. So that's the idea. So welcome, Pavel. Good to have you here from India. Ashakar from Bangladesh. Awesome. India's in the house. This is really good. I'm noticing, I guess, it's 9 a.m. here in beautiful Denver, Colorado, which is right in the center of the U.S. Well, I don't know. Actually, I think we're kind of considered West Coast, but over the Rocky Mountains, essentially, it's about 9 a.m. So I think we get more people from India and all that if I broadcast earlier. So this is good data for me. So just let me know where you're from. I would love to just kind of get an idea where you're from. And I'm going to dive into this. So I can actually give you a couple different things. This is all kind of centered around learning Illustrator, because we've noticed a lot of users have a tough time, understanding Illustrator, right? I mean, it's kind of tricky. So yeah, that's the idea. And just so you know, I can actually show this to you in a second as I switch over to my screen. Here's my lovely screen. So essentially what we have here is I've sort of introduced people to Illustrator, sort of what we'd create. Here's the basics of Illustrator. Again, I'm trying to simplify Illustrator and all these crazy tools. We have all these tools. What do we do with all of them? How do they all work? It's kind of overwhelming, So what can we do to make our lives easier when working with Illustrator, right? But that's typically what I do is I will pick a workspace, I'll then pick a tool, I'll then make sure I have a stroke and fill color. It's kind of behind my head, but hopefully you can see that. And then I'll start drawing, okay? And then from there I can select it using the selection tools, modify that shape, use the selection and the direct selection tool. And then I can use the properties panel to manipulate it some more as well. Of course, lots of effects. And then also just an intro to Illustrator, understanding organization, the layers panel, and the stacking order of things becomes really important. And then also how artboards work. So that's essentially my crash course in Illustrator. So Amy, you're too kind. Servan, it is 8:30 p.m. in India. Fantastic. And I want to make this conversation with you as well, so I'll keep an eye on chat. Mohammed, thank you so much for the warm welcome. Salish, cell shading. Yeah, so we can talk about shading and different things. So right over here, this is what I'd have people kind of learn how to learn how to draw something. So, and actually I'm just going to remove this. I'm going to remove that. And I'm just going to create something again. I have my workspace set up. So you can go to workspace. You can go to Essentials Classic. The big thing there is I'll typically have my properties panel open. And this becomes very important. My properties panel, really, if you're new to Illustrator, you're lucky, because back in the day we did not have this. But this is great when it comes to sort of manipulating shapes. So what do? We select something, of course. Right over here, I'm selecting this ellipse. I'm going to select these colors down here. It looks like I have a blue color and then a no color behind it. Hopefully you could see that behind my head. But I can switch those to be just a black stroke and a white fill. So with that done, I can draw out, holding down the Shift key, and guess what? You hold down the Alt key too. draw out a circle, right? So again, this is what I mean when I say properties panel. Oh, look, thank you so much. Properties panel gives me all the properties and all that I need when it comes to, there we go, all of the options that I need to transform or to change the color of the stroke, for instance, or the fill. So right here, jump in, you know, this is what I initially want to do, kind of increase the size of this, right? And then I can click on it, and then I can change the color just by clicking on that stroke right there. And I can change that to a red. I can change the fill, of course, as well, to a different shade, maybe a nice gold. Okay. All right. So again, just diving into this. Yeah, I'm looking awesome in the lower left. So again, that's creating basic shapes. This is what I showed earlier as well, right? We want to manipulate it. We could use the direct selection tool. I can select this, or I can select this top point and say, oh, okay, I can move this in, for instance. Okay, that's cool, right? There we go. And I can manipulate any one of these points, okay? But once I have this changed, it's actually going to stay right in here. I'm going to delete that. It's going to stay right down here. Oh, guess what? Those are my two colors. Oh, hey, let's go ahead and select a rectangle. I can draw out a rectangle and manipulate it. What are we making? Great question. I'll show you that in a second. First off, what am I going to make? I'm going to make a face. Okay, so again, thank you. It's a very nice circle. Yeah, right. It wasn't that nice. It was like a circle, but circles are nice. Here's just a rectangle that I made, and I want to make a face. Okay, so I'm going to go from 0 to more advanced really quickly, but essentially here is my rectangle, and I notice these little dots right down here. These are your control points for the corners, right? So if I grab one of those, or really it's just selecting all of them, I can turn a rectangle into a circle, right? You see these little dots? That's what that's doing. I can bring that back out. What if I want to just control one of these points? I can do that as well. Okay, so how I do that is with the direct selection tool. And then rather than just selecting this point and pulling it out, I want to click and drag to select both of these. Mohad, you're too kind. And then, since these two, let's keep in mind, just these two are selected, just these two control points, I can now curve that in, zoop, like that. That's what I want, right? That's perfect, because again, I said I'm making a face. Let's go ahead and, with the ellipse tool, we'll make two eyes. Click and drag. If you hold down the Option key while you drag, you can make two. There's the two eyes. Now what's going to happen? Oh, always want to hear where you're from. So Mohammed's from Pakistan. Again, we're just working on this face. Person looks a little crazy. We need to fix this. I want to fill in, right, those eyes rather than giving it that big thick stroke. I just want to fill it in solid orange. So let's like pull out this panel so you can see this a little better. Right here, right down here. Again, this is important 101 stuff. Oh yeah, I love it. Shortcut keys. Let's talk about it. But I can flip these two, the fill and the stroke, by clicking right there. Boop. Flipping the two, right? And we can see that better if I pull that off, right? Flipping through the two, swapping the foreground with the background. Okay, just like that. So I can flip those two, right? And rather than having that thick stroke, I can bring that stroke to the front. And then right down here, this is the none. I'm saying, hey, since this is in the front, make that none. I need to turn down the music a little bit. All right, so click none, boom, done. Those are my eyes, and that's how you control colors in Illustrator so far. Boom, Shift X. Oh, by the way, you could just, I don't know about Shift X. If you do Shift X, it'll flip the two, and then you could hit X, and that'll just bring the whatever opposing color to the foreground. So good call, man. You work in Illustrator, Alexander. You know what's up. It is 9 a.m. here, which is why I desperately need coffee. Desperately, desperately. All right, so let's draw. We're going to create a simple line. You ready for this? How's that color? It's a little hot. It's a little hot, I admit it. I can change this. All right, not to worry. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and, again, use the pen tool. This is what I talked about yesterday. I can draw with the pen tool. Click, 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 right? Try something like that. Okay, and this is what happens. Oh, that's actually kind of cute. I like that. This is the fill. Notice how the fill is set to orange, and that's why it's doing it that way. I can flip it, and now the stroke is filled with that orange. I'm going to increase the size of that stroke. That's kind of what I was thinking about. Oh, Alexander, 5 p.m. in France. Yes. Oh, coffee is like, you just have days. You just have days. Okay, so there's some things going on here that we can talk about. I can curve this out a little bit better. What if we want to round the ends? You know how to do this, Alexander. Selecting this line. Again, the properties panel is your best friend. I'm going to scroll down. Hey, I want to round the ends of the stroke. Hey, let's click on that. Oh, right over here. Yeah, it's the cap that I want to work on. Let's click on rounding the cap. Sure enough, it rounds the cap, and then we have this nice smile. It's not perfect though. Sure, it needs help. Right? We can do a couple different things. Again, this isn't necessarily about drawing. This is about color, right? Let's work on the color for this. Shall we? Yes, we shall. Okay, so I'm going to open up a couple panels. Super helpful. The color panel right over here. Fantastic. Well, guess what? It's going to change the color. And swatches becomes huge, right? So I'm going to start using swatches much more effectively. Yes, exactly. Nishant, you can cut a half circle to use as a smile. Here's another thing you can do. I like that idea. One thing I'd want to try, because again, maybe I don't want a perfect half circle. Let's delete that. Let's introduce you to the new curvature tool, or fairly new curvature tool. Selecting that, I'm just going to click once. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to click again. And then I'm going to come over here. Look how it already starts to bend this line. So the curvature tool is going to give you those smooth curves that I like. Click again. Much better. Like a little more organic than the half circle, which is what I traditionally do. Yeah, and then you can do I don't know what you're talking about. Like you could do something like this. I'd do like, is it like that? Do they have chubby cheeks? Right? We're just having fun right now. Oops. There, he has his chubby cheeks now. And this is what I want to do. I want to change colors. So I could select this, and I have to, if I want to change the color and I decide I want to just change this, more to a, in this case, I'm going to make sure this color is on top. I'm going to change it more to like maybe a blue face, for instance, right? I can change this, but I have to change all those strokes. So what you can do is you can actually go into select, and you can select the same stroke color. Right? You know about this. I know Kevin does, right? But check this out, Kevin. Here's an easier way to get to that. So select same stroke color. You actually can go right over here, right up here if you're interested, selecting these similar options, and then right here select similar objects. Okay, so you have these different options. So I'm going to come right up here, click down, and I'm going to select. It's just an easier, faster way to select the same stroke color. So boom. So notice how it didn't select anything because I changed the color. But again, that's what I'd want to, if I want to change the color of multiple things at once, I'd come down here and select the same stroke color that way. So it's selected all the lines, not the eyes, not to worry, but now I can change everything to blue very easily. Let's just select these eyes, you know, change them to, oops, making sure that color is on top. Again, hit the X key if you're a pro, and now we have our fun face like that. Let's add some more dynamic ness to him. I think he's kind of looking like a Lego is what he's looking like. But again, what I'd traditionally do is maybe change the fill as well, right? So it's like, you know, I don't know why he's blue. But again, we're experimenting with color, so that's kind of the idea today, right? And since I'm experimenting and playing with color, maybe I want to give him more of a flesh tone, maybe more of an orange. I'm kind of liking the orange. I'm just clicking in this color panel right here. I can say, hey, I kind of like this orange. That looks pretty good. Same thing for the stroke. Selecting the same stroke color. Watch, I'm going to end up with the same tones that I was working with earlier. Maybe we'll go with black. Okay, so you ready for this? Good morning, Tim. Good to have you here. Tim, have you noticed this, by the way? What we have here is we have this color right down here. You'll come down here and you'll say, hey, swatches, this looks like black. You'll click on it. And you go over here, yeah, it's like, okay, is that really black? Does that look like black to you? I'm like, okay, I'll go up here. What about this black color? Right, rolling over that. That looks like black. Click on that. Oh, that's black. Because again, if I double click on this swatch, you can see that this is just an RGB process color. Okay, that's not quite your fully black. So there's actually, you know, print colors, and then there's actually, so there's RGB, there's grayscale, there's hue, saturation, brightness, CMYK. So sometimes you'll sort of select a CMYK black, and it might not translate well to an RGB black. Okay, so if something's gray, it's probably because you're using this black right here. But what I've just done is I've changed it. So I can jump in here and I can change any of these colors to a true black. Because by default, this swatches panel, again, gives you this sort of CMYK black that's not a true black. If you're using, yeah, you have to use the K value. Exactly, yes. But hopefully you've noticed that even down here, like for this color, even if I'm using this K value, as I click on that, the K value translates to this RGB color. So when you're using the K value, it doesn't translate correctly to RGB if you're not going to print it. And that's kind of my point, right? So again, just be aware of, like, if you click on a color and it's like, yeah, that looks like a dark gray, it's using the K value at 100 and it's not using the RGB value where everything's set to 0. Zip, zip, zip. And again, I can change that. I just changed it. CMYK 000. Roll over this one. This one just says black. You get the idea. Okay, moving on along. Let's change these eyeballs. Why not? Hitting the X key will flip those two colors. Clicking right there, that's maybe it looks a little better. Maybe I could do some more things like adding a little, maybe it needs a little highlight. Maybe it needs a little highlight in his eyes. I don't know why I feel like doing that, but you know, there's this little highlight. Sure. Okay, let's take a look at his face now. Okay, so essentially, yeah, Tim, it'll throw you off, by the way. Let's take a look at the color space that we're working in. So I'm going to go to right in here. If I go to File, Document Color Mode, I'm just making sure that I'm working with RGB color for this file, since it's just going to be broadcast for you guys and not printed out. The nice thing is you could change this at any time later on if you want to. So RGB color, that's typically what I go with. I'm starting to get this laid out. I want to give it more of a rounded look is what I'm thinking. I want to have some gradients in here rather than just this color right here. And in fact, let's round these corners too. There we go. And let's give him a cap real fast. Let's just do this. I gotta do this. He needs more color. All right, let's take this, duplicate it. Flip it, move it up. I want to give him like a nice little cap because this is what I did yesterday. And just a refresh for everyone. There he has his little hat. Little hat's right here. We'll make his hat red. Or is it really red? Let's crank that up. RGB. Boom, boom, boom. Click OK. Vibrant red. And then we have, again, his brim. Like that. All right, cool. We have our character. Let's work on shading, right? So what do we want to do now? A couple ways we could do shading. In the settings, can you change it to true black? I think you can. What I'm kind of showing you to do is, yeah, let's just check on that. The big thing is here's, if you're going to use the swatches panel, I'm showing you how you can edit these colors because chances are you're going to want to edit these. But yeah, I'm sure in preferences, I'd have to double check whether you're working. Yeah, Tim, if you could find that out for me where that's at, that would be awesome because I'm sure it's probably in here somewhere. Oh, there we go. Appearance of black. There we are. Display all black as rich black. Display all blacks accurately. All right, so there we go. I just changed display all blacks accurately. That's for the display. I don't know if it's going to change your swatches panel, I guess is the question. Okay. All right, so we got his cool, funky, fresh baseball cap. That's right. This is typically what people will do also. As I dive into this, I just have this like a different layer, but I can jump in here. I'll lock down this previous layer. We'll start to add like some shadowing and stuff. So maybe I want to have for his cap, you know, maybe it's casting a shadow down, right? So this is one thought that I might do is take this and since I'm using this color here, I can go change that to black. And for this black fill color, that's what I'm using. I can go over to my appearance panel and then I can drop this opacity down if I want to just give it a nice shadow. And let's work on this curve. Right, so that's what you might see happening. That's what I'm doing right now to just give this plus sign, add a point. A key is direct selection. Let's bring that down right here. And I'm just casting a shadow right there, okay? I can do the same thing up here on this top part. P for pen tool. Let's just add a shadow on this side of his cap as well. And this is what is known as basically sort of adding hard shadows to things, which seems to be okay, right? That's not bad. That might work in this case. There's our fun character. Let's scale him down. But I want to get into something a little bit more advanced, if you don't mind, and start to work on gradients, okay? Yeah, the swatches are still set per document, so these swatches are saved. If I open up, so be mindful of these colors. So notice how I have this color, a new gradient swatch. I made that. If I make a new file, because that's a good question, Pierre. If I create a new document, notice how that new gradient swatch disappeared. So it's attached to the file and not to Illustrator. Okay. Let's give me some room. Give me some room. Let's work on some gradients. Here's another way I can execute that. Rather than adding those shadows, these are just hard shadows. Let's turn that off. Let's just add some gradients now as well. So for this fill, what I can do, yeah, I can pick colors, but there's also gradients down here. I can try them out. You know, and typically I will. I'll try like an orange yellow, maybe this pink. And I'm thinking, okay, I actually want to go from a light red to a dark red. So I'm going to go into, and I typically start with somebody else with a gradient, and then I can go to gradient options. What that does is that will pop up this gradient panel. I already have it open, but let me close it just so you can see that work. Fill, gradient, gradient options. It'll open up your gradient panel. From here, we can start to change these colors as I click. Okay, there it is. There's that true red that we've defined. And I can take sort of like the red, have it go from red to a darker red as I change this gradient. Okay. Again, this is sort of the intro to Illustrator, getting started in Illustrator as the title suggests, even though I got some super smart people here. You guys know what's going on. So what's happening here? We have this linear gradient, right? Doesn't necessarily work for a cap. I want to make it a radial gradient. Selecting that. That's more along the lines of what I want, but I don't want it to be in the center, right? I want it to be off to the side. And look at this control point, by the way, that I can change. That's when I use the gradient tool. So selecting that. Oh, thank you very much. Let's move this over. I get these control points to expand out, in this case, the gradient, and have that nice transition right there. Typically, once I make a gradient, this is what I do. I'm like, oh, I spent all this time on this gradient. Chances are I want to use it again. Let's go over to the swatches panel. We'll save this as a new swatch using that flyout menu in the swatches panel. Clicking right there. I never name my gradients. Would love to know, Pierre and Tim, if you actually have ever named a color swatch, because I never have in like ever. It's worse than naming layers. Like I name my layers, you can see them up here, but yeah, it's pretty bad. There's my new swatch, and then I can move on. I want to go on to something more advanced. Again, yeah, this is getting started, so I kind of feel bad about going on to something more advanced, but I want to like sort of tackle all scenarios. Again, we know how to add these gradients like I'm doing now. Selecting the fill. And typically like selecting a gradient. That's pretty good. Let's go into the gradient options. Look at this. Look at the number of stops this one has. How's everyone doing? Yeah, you could save it as a graphic style too. All right, so that actually looks pretty good. I typically sort of like simplify this. Oh yeah, he's been... There we go. Adding a color stop on this side. And let's do one more thing just like I did before, changing this from linear to radial. Right, of course, it's going to give it that burst. A little hot, right? I want to give it like a little highlight. I want to start to control these. Overall, I want it to be orange, and then using the gradient tool to move this off to the side like that. So it's going to be coming from, say, that direction, and expand that out. Again, we are working with color in Illustrator, if you're just joining me. What we're going to have happening, what's happening in about 30 minutes on behance.net/live is graphic design. All graphic design this week, so that's where you should go next. And here's our lovely, fun, essentially looks like a Lego toy, our little character, okay? All right, cool. Again, for this, saving that as a graphic style. Done and done. Nishant, I'm making an emoji. I could do that. It already kind of looks like an emoji. We could have a lot of fun with it. Okay. I kind of want to move on to some more complex objects, right? And we did pretty well here. This looks really good. Just kind of going back to, again, sort of these are Illustrator basics. Yesterday I covered sort of how to use the pen tool. I dove into sort of working with basic shapes. These basic shapes are really pretty straightforward, but very easy to work with. Oh yeah, you can use the appearance panel to add multiple gradients to one shape. Oh, yeah. So that's something that's a great idea. Let's think about that. Maybe it will work for this scenario. Let's go back to our character. And let's take a look at that, because Kevin mentioned the appearance panel. If I click on this, again, we've been using the properties panel. This has pretty much most of the things we need, but we might want to open up the appearance panel right here by clicking on that. It's already opened because it popped up down there. Here's my appearance panel, right? And this is what Kevin's talking about, right? So this is where I could actually come in and add maybe a duplicate of the selected item, right? So this is what I'd want to do. This is what I'm going to do right now, actually. Because for this looks pretty good overall. I want to actually just change this fill really fast. I want to change this fill. Let's move this down. Let's put this right over here. Just taking out that highlight. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this and I can duplicate the selected item. Now we have two fills, right? And I'll just change this just to show you my case in point. Moving this up, whatever's on top is going to override what's below, just like in our traditional layers panel. But what I can do with this new one, since Kevin mentioned this, thank you so much for mentioning this. I think it's a good idea. Is I'm going to change this to just be the highlight, because I want to be able to control the highlight on this character and not have it interfere with the overall gradient. So again, let's just add that blue. So notice how this blue has transparency in it. We're going to get into transparency, but we have that blue transparency. I can turn that on and off. You can see how that works, right? But let's take a look at that particular gradient now. Opening up the gradient panel. Let's separate these so everyone knows. I'm going to change this to radial. Oh, there it is, right on his nose. But really, I want to change this to white. So we're separating out the highlight from the overall fill of the face. So this just gives me more control to, in this case, wait for it, move this anywhere I want, because now I have the control to have this highlight right up here. Maybe make it a little stronger in this case or something. Maybe a little softer. I'll just play with it a little. But the thing is that I can move this around and it's separated out from the fill below it. So good job, Kevin. I use the appearance panel. I typically don't stack a lot of gradients one on top of the other, and I really need to get in the habit of doing that. Yes, Alexander, the new properties panel really is awesome. Is your new best friend. Because again, that's all I've been using to open up these other panels, and it works just fine. Okay, so with that done, typically whenever I make a gradient, I have this nice radial gradient. Let's add that to our new swatch. Done, click OK. You know, I can repeat that. So right over here for this fill, let's duplicate that fill. Let's change this fill to that new highlight we just created. And there it is. Okay. Let's go beyond that because the appearance panel, you know, gives me that strong highlight, and I can control it to a certain degree with the gradient tool, you know, scaling it down and different things. But what I want to do is I want to change how it interacts with the color below it. Because look at this, the opacity. I can change the opacity, right? That's pretty straightforward. But there's also color modes in here as well. So not only did we change this color, but we could change the color to say color burn, for instance, or overlay. I don't even really, let's just kind of play with some of these to see if we get anything interesting. Typically I'd want color burn. Let's just go back into this. There we go. Okay, overlay works well. So essentially this is just a color mode I've changed, and now you can kind of see how it's changing. It doesn't really make it that much brighter, so in this case I guess color mode doesn't help me that much. But you have color modes in there, I guess, is the main point I wanted to get to. Overlay doesn't really give it the pop that I'm looking for. But, all right, so we have our nice highlight. All right, cool, cool. Ooh, you typically do that with a Gaussian blur, so... Or you could use a feathered white circle. So many ways of doing things. This is interesting. So we're getting into shaded methods. And in that case, we're talking about objects, you know, a more complex project. First of all, I think we did a good job. So thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, excellent job with our little character here. Let's go to a more complex scenario down here. All right. Again, I can close those two panels because I can always get to them from my properties panel. Here we have this, you know, very nice. This was basically created by outlining this shape, this woman. So just using the pen tool, go around, and obviously she has lots of, we need to add lots of color, lots of shading in here. So kind of taking a look at this, I can see that there's a fill color right here. I can change that. Oh, it's kind of changing different things. So I'm going to do this really fast based on what we know, and I'll just talk us all through this. So this is typically how I'd work. Select fill color. Ooh, excuse me, let's undo that. Selecting a fill color is going to select all of those. Let's actually remove that. I've selected everywhere I've used white. That's what I'm doing. And then I can sort of pick my color off to the side here to give myself a starting point. Maybe she's Gamora. Maybe she's an alien. But essentially, let's kind of go through this. Let's try to pick a nice color, like something like that. If I pick a color from the color panel, I can actually click on the color swatch right here, and you can go into, rather than picking colors in here, I can go into my color mixer, because in this case I actually want to make it a little sort of like give her a little more. In fact, I'm going to change this to RGB. You see how complex this got awfully fast, by the way? Because I was picking colors over here. This wasn't working for me. It's like, okay, I need her to be kind of like, maybe she's kind of darker skinned. She's not orange, but she's not this crazy, she's not this orange color. She doesn't need to be orange. I need to scale down the, essentially the intensity of this color, the saturation. I need to desaturate this color. Right? If you go up, you're kind of lightening it, but I just need to desaturate this color. So how would you do that? Right? So here we go. This is what I do. Let's go into the fill color. Oh, fill color gives me more options right in here to where I can like take some of these and maybe add black to it or add more pink to it. But again, I want to desaturate this so I can go into this flyout menu and check out, oh, now we can go to hue, saturation, and brightness. Because again, I want to take down the saturation. Changes that hue, saturation, brightness. I can take that down and get the sort of the tint that I want in this case. Could be anything, doesn't really matter. I'm showing you how to change the saturation in this case. Okay, we've taken that down. That looks good. I spent time on that. Typically, I'll go over here and save that as a new swatch. Name it appropriately. Like that. Yeah, Pierre, typically I do use, I usually work in RGB. But the color I picked happened to be a CMYK color. Because all I was doing was randomly picking color for my swatches down here. Either way, I'm adding my own color profiles right over here that are going to work well. Okay, so far so good. I'm noticing this white. What's going on here, Paul? What is that all about? Let's change that to black. Let's change that to black too, maybe? Maybe not. All right. So this is, somebody mentioned this, somebody added sort of blurring and feathering and stuff like that. We can take a look at that, and that's kind of what I wanted to do in here. So again, I can add a gradient to this as a whole. If I had that gradient, which I'm gonna have to mix right now. And I'm gonna go for about 10 more minutes. Do I use redefine colors? I don't use redefine colors. I do use sort of editing colors, and I think we'll get there in a second. But is redefine colors right up here? Edit colors. I use recolor artwork, not redefine colors, but please clarify. So anyway, so this is what I'm working on. Again, zoom out, adding a layer. This is what I was doing with this piece, is starting to colorize it and get something nice, right? I'd add a circle in the background, like, hey, do I like that, right? Do I like something like that? Do I want to make a smaller version that's darker? You know, maybe select both of these. Again, just working with colors, and then I can always recolor this artwork too. Do I want to do something like that in this case? Maybe. Let's fix our ear. It's spring, almost summer. I say we change these colors to some brighter colors. Hitting the X key will always put the key that's in the background, put it in the foreground. And again, we can go with a bright yellow. Oops. Something like that, maybe. Is that too bright? We'll work with it. Lots of sun on her face, right? Do we change this gradient right here? Got that. Welcome to my world. Want this to be darker. There we go. Let's fix her nose, because I'm sure that's bothering people too. All right, looks good. Adding some more to this. Yes, I need to fill in her eyes. I need to get rid of this, that color in there. The big thing is I actually want to save this color swatch right here. So I have that nice gradient. You get the idea. All right, so I'm going to get into this point where I want to shade the back of her hand, okay? So maybe I can sort of do let's do a radial. And I can try to do that with some sort of radial burst. Like maybe that's just like down here. But I want to get it in. I want to get into sort of like another sort of shading method that you can work with that somebody mentioned a second ago. Because what I can do is take a color. In this case, I do have this color right here, which I like. All right. Just use the pencil tool, and we're going to draw something on the back of her hand because I want to shade this. Currently, again, you can see that it is dark. Like that. Let's actually change this color. Another shading method, since we're kind of getting into shading methods. Effect. Blur. Gaussian blur. So if I wanted to blend two colors together, I can use something like the Gaussian blur. I don't know who uses this, but this is always an option, right? Gaussian blur, blur that out, click OK. Right, so that's what I've added. You can see I changed that there. I'll move this over, so this is what's going to happen. It's going to like get kind of ugly on this side. We can fix that. There's a number of ways we can do that. I have a zillion ways to do pretty much everything, right? Let's go to my appearance panel. For the fill, I can actually change this to darken. I don't notice that it's actually changing it. But I can actually change how it interacts with the background, essentially. But that's all I'm adding right there. Let me open up a different example. Again, this is not perfect, but again, this is still a vector shape that I can kind of control the size of. So I can make this sort of interesting shape that goes down like that, and it gets me out of having to worry about, you know, having a shape that's, you know, very specific. Something doesn't have to be a radial or a gradient to get the appropriate look. Let's do something like that. Cool. That's all I'd add. Just a little splash right here. I could do that on her face as well. Use it so much, but you can't use it right up to the edge of things. So, yes. So, exactly right. Trixie Bell, you use it. You can't use it right up to things. A lot of times you can play with the color mode, which is what I was working on. So if you do have something large that has a color, if I go into the color mode for it, if I change it to darken, it's going to make it so it can go blend in with the black. If you have black next to it, and that's what I was taking a look at, is like, how can I make that blend in with the background? And it should be darken. That's what I selected. So anyways, so darken will typically kind of get you out of some of those scenarios. I'm going to open up a final piece just so you can get an idea for color. We'll also like a recolor artwork, and I'm not, I may or may not do it here, but let me open up a different piece. Something that I just posted to Instagram yesterday, last night. We could just take a look at how I've used colors and then how we can change those colors as well. But here's something, and maybe she looks like a little too dusty, I think, honestly. I think I made her look a little too dusty. But essentially there's lots of different colors. Here I'm using a gradient mesh, the mesh tool right over here. And that's what's happening there. I feel like I need to adjust the transparency there. For this gradient mesh. Because she looks a little dirty. But you can see right in here, all of this is done with the gradient tool that way. So, All right, let me show you something else. You ready for this? So what if you need to recolor artwork? I want to recolor and experiment with, you know, just some of the colors in the background, okay? See if I have any questions. All right, cool. What if I want to recolor artwork in the background? I happen to have multiple gradients. I have this gradient. Let's lock that down. And then I have this artwork right here. I can go into something like edit colors and then recolor artwork. Keep in mind, I'm just recoloring the background. So rather than manipulating those gradients separately, I can go into recolor artwork and then I can change the color of them as a whole, right? So I can click on brights, for instance, and it changes everything to, of course, those bright colors. I can go into complementary colors, right? Again, just working on the background alone. I like that. But this is typically what I'll do if I feel like I need to experiment with colors in this case. I'm like, I'm not sure what's going to work for this particular piece. I think the brighter the better because this looks really good actually. I might want to keep this. Yeah, so Alexander, typically I will use a clipping mask as well. Anytime you want a color to end at an edge, you'll turn it into a clipping mask. Like the eyes, that's a scenario where, you know, you would do that. So you don't want to have to worry about blend modes and all that craziness. You just make the eyes a clipping mask and stuff like that. But check this out. So this looks pretty good. I like where this is headed. Okay, I'm going to go into, I've assigned colors. I'm going to edit these colors now. So these are all the active colors. I can lock, unlink, or link these colors. So notice how they're at dotted lines. Means I can move them independently. So let's just grab this color because this is probably the color that's the most, you know, drastic. Or I can edit them together. So shift everything over to a different position, right? So again, this is typically how I'll end up playing with colors. I really like that pink too. That looks good, right? Super cool. From there, you can also access other color swatches. I have my document swatches if I wanted to match it to it. But since this is essentially a classical piece, oh, look at this, Renaissance, because this is actually a Renaissance, Birth of Venus. Botticelli's Birth of Venus. I've selected Renaissance colors, and this is more the palette that is used. And since this is a remix of this Renaissance piece, I can go into still edit and start to tweak these colors accordingly. Right, for this color, let's brighten it up. Brighten it up. Yeah, it looks like it already maps it. So yeah. That's Recolor artwork, Renaissance, clicking OK. Yeah, it's not bad. Steve April likes it. He says, nice. All right, well, that's kind of where I'm at with this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, we're just kind of going through and how to work with colors in Adobe Illustrator. We've worked with fills, strokes, how to apply colors, and finally how to change colors for an exciting effect like you see here. But I'm going to let you go. What's happening in about 5 minutes is we have a graphic design stream on Behance.net. Shift these over. Oh yeah, something like that. Done. /live. Join me there because that's where I'm going to head it. I'm going to watch that. Fantastic. And again, how you got to that was right here. So thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on the Instagrams and social medias and all that stuff. That's where I've actually posted this on my Instagram, which is PTRANI But I do want to thank you so much for joining me today, and we will catch you next time. And let's hop over to behance.net/live. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a